let's try a little thought experiment. When I say the word poverty, what's the first image that pops into your head? It seems like a pretty simple question, right? But, the answer, it's way more complex than we often assume. So today, let's really dig in and ask, what is poverty really?
Yeah, it's probably something a lot like this, isn't it? For most of us, this is the picture we conjure up. A family without a proper home, maybe their clothes are worn. It's a really powerful image, and it immediately gets us thinking about what people don't have. The basic material things.
And look, this picture tells a crucial part of the story. It's absolutely true. But, and this is a big but, it is not the whole story. Not even close. It's kind of like reading just one chapter of a really long book. So what's missing? What aren't we seeing here?
Well, for a long, long time, the way we understood poverty, especially the way economists talked about it, was honestly surprisingly narrow. It all boiled down to just one single simple idea: income. Basically, the old school thinking went like this: you're poor if you don't have enough money. End of story. The problem is defined as a lack of cash, so the solution must be, well, more cash, right? It's all a very clean, straightforward calculation.
And on the surface, that kind of makes sense. It's logical. But does it really capture the full experience of being poor? Can you really solve all of poverty's tangled, complex challenges with just a paycheck? This is where things get really interesting. Modern thinking has totally blown up that old definition. We've started to recognize that poverty isn't just about what's in your wallet. It snakes its way into every single corner of a person's life.
So the big shift, the real game changer, is seeing poverty as multidimensional. It's not just one problem, no money. It's a whole bunch of problems all tangled together. Think of it like a diamond. You can't just look at one flat side and say you've seen the whole thing. You have to turn it over, see all the different facets to really get it. And that's exactly how we need to look at poverty.
So let's start with the material stuff, but go a little deeper. Yeah, of course, it's about food, clothing, and a roof over your head. But what about not being able to see a doctor when you're sick? Or not being able to send your kids to a decent school? What about living somewhere with no reliable roads, no electricity, or where you can't even get a clean glass of water? These are all very real physical deprivations, and just having a bit more money doesn't magically fix all of them. But then there are the invisible parts of poverty, the things you can't see. I'm talking about social discrimination, being shut out from your own community, or being denied opportunities not because you aren't smart enough or can't do the work, but just because of who you are. And let me tell you, that kind of thing can be just as crippling as not having enough to eat.
Now, this whole new way of thinking didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was really pushed forward by one person with an idea that was, and I'm not exaggerating here, a total game changer. It literally reshaped how governments and organizations all over the world started to tackle poverty.
And that person is Professor Amartya Sen. He's a brilliant Indian economist and a Nobel laureate. And he didn't just, tweak the old definition a little bit. Nope. He offered a completely new lens, a whole new way to view what it means for a human to be well and what it means to be deprived.
And this is the heart of his idea. It's so powerful. Poverty is not just a lack of money. It is not having the capability to realize one's full potential as a human being. Wow. Just let that sink in for a second. With that one sentence, the entire focus shifts. It's no longer about what you have in your pocket. It's about what you are able to do and who you are able to be. So what on earth are these capabilities he's talking about? Well, to put it simply, they're the real, actual freedoms people have to lead the lives they truly value. It's about having genuine choices and the power to actually act on them.
So what does a lack of these freedoms look like in the real world? It's not being able to satisfy your own hunger or get basic nutrition. It means being denied access to a doctor or a school. But it also goes deeper. It's the denial of your political and civil liberties, the freedom to participate in your own society without fear. Okay, so we've got this new, bigger definition. Great. But why does this shift from income to capabilities matter so much? What does it actually change on the ground? Well, when you put them side by side, the difference is just stark. The old view, poverty is a lack of money. The new view, poverty is a lack of freedom and capabilities. That simple change moves the entire conversation away from focusing on resources, on stuff, and puts the focus squarely back on people. And here's the absolute key takeaway. Under this new framework, poverty is no longer just a static condition of being poor. It becomes an active injustice. It is the denial of a person's fundamental right to achieve their potential. It's about wasted lives and unfulfilled dreams.
We all know poverty is a huge problem, right? A massive one. But how do you actually measure something so complex? I mean, to even begin to fight a problem this big, you first have to agree on what it is you're fighting. And that's exactly what we're getting into today, how we draw that all-important poverty line. So let's just start with a few big questions to get our heads around this. First up, think about all the wealth in a country. Is it shared equally? I mean, really, is everyone getting a fair slice of the pie? And you know, it's not just about the cash in your pocket, right? What about the real essentials for a good life? Does every single person have the same shot at a great education or good health care? Or heck, what about something as basic as clean water to drink? And maybe the most gut-wrenching question of all, is anyone in the country actually going hungry? I mean, think about it. The answers to these questions, they tell you so much about a society, and they really bring home why we absolutely need a clear, consistent way to figure all of this out. Okay, so to even begin to answer those huge questions, we need a way to think about it, a framework. And here's the first surprise. Poverty isn't just one single thing. Turns out there are two really different ways to define it. Let's dive into that. So on one hand, you've got what's called absolute poverty. This is all about falling below a fixed, bare minimum standard for survival. Then, on the other hand, you have relative poverty, which is totally different. It's about how you stack up compared to everyone else around you. See the difference? One is a hard line you can cross, and the other is all about the gap between people. Let's dig into absolute poverty first. At its very core, this one is all about pure survival. It's measured by the most fundamental human need there is, food. It really boils down to this. Can you afford the minimum number of calories you need to just live a healthy life? If your income doesn't even cover that, well, that's the definition of absolute poverty. And believe me, this gets super specific. The line is actually set at 2,400 calories a day for folks in rural areas, where there's generally more physical work. And it's a little lower, 2,100, for people in the cities. And just like that, you take this abstract idea and turn it into a concrete number, something a government can actually work with. All right, now let's flip over to relative poverty. This one isn't about that fixed survival line at all. It's all about where you stand compared to everybody else in your society. It's measuring the difference in things like income, wealth, and what people are buying. So you might have enough food on the table, sure, but if you're so far behind the average person that you're basically shut out of normal life, well, that's what we call being relatively poor. Okay, so we've got these two big ideas of poverty, right? Absolute and relative. But how do governments actually, turn this theory into something they can use to make decisions? Well, they rely on one single, incredibly powerful tool, the poverty line. Now, you might hear it called an imaginary line, and, well, I guess it is. But let me tell you, its consequences for policy, for funding, and for real people's lives are anything but imaginary. They are very, very real. So what is it officially? Well, Niti Aayog, the Indian government's key policy think tank, calls it the amount necessary to purchase a basket of goods and services to satisfy basic human needs at socially acceptable levels. And notice that key phrase, socially acceptable. We're not just talking about calories anymore. This is about having what you need to actually function in society. So, why does this one line matter so much? Why do people spend so much time and energy calculating it? Well, because it's so much more than just a statistic. It's a tool that's designed from the ground up to drive action. This line has basically 4 superpowers. First, it helps determine who's above the line and who's below it. You've probably heard the term BPL, or below poverty line. Getting that label is often the first step to getting help. Second, it identifies who the poor are by looking at what their household actually spends money on, which is often a better indicator than income. Third, and this one is huge, it acts like a country's report card. You can track poverty over time in one place or compare different regions. And finally, number 4, it puts a price tag on the problem. It helps governments figure out how much money they actually need to set aside for all their poverty-fighting programs. And really, this all brings us to the main point. Measuring poverty, it isn't just an academic exercise. It's the absolute first step you have to take if you ever want to manage it, and hopefully, one day, solve it. Because as the saying goes, you can't fix a problem you can't even see. So by drawing that seemingly imaginary line, we make the invisible visible. It lets us pinpoint who needs help It lets us check our work to see if our plans are actually making a difference, and it lets us plan for a better future. A future where, hopefully, no one gets left behind.
All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're tackling something huge and honestly, really important: poverty in India. We're going to look at how it's actually measured, dig into the deep-rooted reasons it's so persistent, and then explore the massive strategies being used to fight it. So, let's get into it.
But before we get into all the official definitions and data, let's just try a quick thought experiment. Take a look at this income pyramid. Where would you put a contract laborer? How about a salesman, a company executive, or a CEO? Just take a second and think about it. This simple exercise really helps visualize the economic inequality that's at the very heart of any conversation about poverty.
So, here's the game plan for our explainer. First, we're going to figure out what poverty even means. Then, we'll zoom in on what it looks like specifically in India. After that, we'll unpack this idea of a vicious circle of poverty, explore the ways to break that cycle, and finally, talk about the ultimate goal: a world with zero poverty.
All right, first things first, what even is poverty? I mean, it sounds simple, right? But as you're about to see, trying to draw a clear line to say who is poor and who isn't, well, that's where it starts to get really complicated.
You know, on a global scale, the World Bank puts a very stark number on it. If you're living on less than $1.90 a day, based on 2011 prices, you are considered to be in extreme poverty. Just let that sink in for a second. That's the international benchmark.
Okay, so that's the global standard. But what does that actually mean for people living in India? How does that number translate to the reality on the ground? Let's take a closer look. Let's bring it home to India. The numbers here are, well, they're pretty eye-opening. Based on a key report from 2011-12, the official poverty line was set at just 972 rupees a month in rural areas and 1,407 rupees in urban areas. Now, if you break that down by day, it comes out to only 32 rupees in the villages and 47 rupees in the cities. I mean, these are incredibly small amounts to survive on. Let's just pause on that one number for a second. 32 rupees. Seriously, think about what you could buy with that. It's supposed to cover everything: food, fuel, clothes, any health needs that come up. This isn't just a statistic on a chart, right? It's the daily reality for millions of people.
And you know, this poverty doesn't look the same everywhere. Out in rural areas, you're talking about the day-to-day struggle of small farmers and agricultural laborers. But in the cities, it's a whole different kind of hardship. It's often fueled by people migrating for a better life, only to run into a lack of affordable housing and good jobs, which is why we see these sprawling slums.
So this all leads to a really big question. If we know what the problem is, why is it so incredibly hard to escape poverty? Well, the answer lies in something economists call the vicious circle, a self-perpetuating cycle that really traps people.
You see, poverty isn't just about not having enough money. It's more like a trap. It's a cycle that's really, really hard to break. An economist named Ragnar Nurkse had a great name for it: the vicious circle, because it just keeps feeding on itself, keeping people and even whole economies stuck. So let's map this whole thing out. It all starts at the big picture level, with low national income. So if the whole country isn't generating a lot of wealth, that naturally means that individual incomes are also going to be low. And when you're barely getting by, saving money, that's pretty much off the table. So as a country, you end up with very, very low savings. And this is the absolute key. If nobody's saving, there's no money for investment, right? No capital for businesses to expand, to innovate, to build new things. Less investment means less production and fewer jobs. And what does that lead to? Right back to where we started: low national income. You see, the circle just keeps going. It's a powerful trap.
Now, that cycle is tough enough on its own, but there are other things that basically pour fuel on the fire. A rapidly growing population puts a strain on everything. Huge economic inequality means the money that is there gets stuck at the top. Inflation just eats away at the little money people do have, and a lack of basic infrastructure like roads and power holds the entire economy back. All of this just tightens the grip of that vicious circle. So if poverty is this massive self-feeding cycle, how on earth do you break it? Well, there's no single magic bullet. It takes a multi-pronged strategy, hitting the problem from a bunch of different angles at once.
One way to intervene is by using economic tools.
Think of them as levers you can pull. Things like the Minimum Wages Act, which was designed to make sure people get fair pay for their work, or nationalizing banks with the idea of giving the poor better access to loans and credit. And then you have progressive taxes, which try to chip away at that massive income inequality we talked about.
But it's not just about economics. Another absolutely critical piece is creating a social safety net. Something to catch people when things go wrong. We're talking about programs for food security so people don't go hungry, affordable housing schemes, and subsidized healthcare. That last one is so important because one unexpected illness can completely wipe out a family's finances.
And here's a perfect example of what that safety net looks like in real life. These ration cards, the saffron and yellow ones, are a lifeline for millions. They're part of the public distribution system, and they let families buy essential food like rice and wheat at a huge discount. It's a fundamental buffer against hunger. And the final piece of this puzzle is all about the long game, empowerment and growth. This means investing in things like free and compulsory primary education. It means skill development so people can create their own jobs. It means supporting agriculture, which is the backbone of the rural economy. All of this is about creating real, sustainable opportunities that last.
Now, all of these efforts in India, they don't happen in a vacuum. They're part of a much bigger global ambition. The end goal isn't just to make poverty a little bit better, but to get rid of it for good.
And believe it or not, there's a deadline. India is one of the countries that signed on to the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. And goal number 1, it couldn't be clearer. The mission is to end poverty in all its forms everywhere by the year 2030.
But getting to that goal is a huge challenge, and it's not the same challenge everywhere in India. Just look at this. The difference between states is massive. Using data from 2011-12, a state like Chhattisgarh had a poverty rate of almost 40%, but in Kerala, it was just over 7%. This shows you that the problem and the solutions have to be tailored to the region.